Hey guys, SoCal Val here. You are listening to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast.
Welcome everybody back to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. This is a really special interview for us here. I know my colleagues and co-host David especially was gutted he couldn't make this one today. We're talking to, I say, a son of an icon. The gentleman is behind me, who we're going to be talking about in a nutshell today. But we're talking to the son of Sting. Is it Steve Borden Jr. or do you prefer just Steve Borden? How do you want me to pronounce it, Steve?
Technically, we have slightly different names, different middle names, but yeah, I'm
Okay.
just Steven Borden is perfectly fine.
Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It's good. And we were just talking before we started this show. Stephen's literally having his breakfast. I'm going to be making my dinner soon. That's the time difference. And you mentioned that you've got friends over in the UK, so you're used to this time difference situation.
That's it.
The
Colleagues in
crazy stuff.
Manchester, kind of all across UK.
Oh, Manchester. That's about 5 hours north from me. I'm just outside of London. So yeah, Essex is where I'm from. It's about 45 minutes from the capital city of England. Let's just get straight on with the revolution bit. I know you've had a lot of podcasts, and I know you've been answered this question so many times. But anyway, how did it initially become about that you were going to be playing one of the characters? I think the one in the red paint behind me, in your father's last ever entrance.
We tossed around an idea, actually, my dad and I, for a couple years doing something together. It wasn't something that had to be in his retirement match. That came about, closer towards when it actually happened. But just doing something together, we weren't really sure what that was. And then as his retirement impending, final match started to become more of a secure date, and we knew what was going to be happening, we just tossed around the idea of, like, look, there's three of us, Garrett, me, my dad. Why don't we play different eras? And so the original plan was I was going to do Crow Sting, Garrett was going to do Surfer Sting. And then obviously my dad was just going to be my dad. And we changed due to Darby Allin brought up a good point, which was like, look, you're going to have two Crows out there if Steven plays Crow. And so that's where we made the pivot for me to do Wolfpack. We're just trying to deliver something cool for the wrestling universe of, giving a chance for people to see a couple different eras all at once.
Yeah, it was really good. I loved it. I was half expecting Joker Sting to make a little appearance part of it.
I had a brother, I bet the brother would have come out as one more. We just needed one more.
That would have been great. But anyway, the entrance was amazing. The fact that Metallica played as well, Seek and Destroy, which just made it that bit more. I remember I was talking off air that I missed All In, and that played obviously All In as well. And it kind of gives the entrance a bit more meaning to it, because that was the one that he had back in WCW. That day of, obviously it's a big thing. It's your dad's retirement. He's been doing this 30 odd years, practically through my childhood. I think when I started watching wrestling, he was Surfer. So pretty much gone through that motion with him, but not with him, but as part of watching it on TV. That whole day, though, just talk. How did it feel surreal that this would be the last time he wrestles?
Yeah, and I think, I mentioned this before, but he's been since before I was born. So I think it's very easy to kind of just take that for granted, and it's just something that's always happening. And the other component to it too is that even though he's been wrestling for my whole life, we actually haven't been as involved as maybe some people would have thought. Part of that was due to, in the WCW days, I was a kid. Garrett and I were super young. He remembers a bit more stories than I do from that time because I was so young. And then in the TNA days, by that point we're high school and we've got plenty of stuff going on. My dad didn't love just sitting at home talking about himself. So we didn't go to a ton of the matches. And so now it's kind of like it felt like everything happened very fast. He's been Sting my whole life. And then all of a sudden kind of started to jump in on some of, his AEW. I came to two shows when he was here in LA, I'm based here in California, so I went to the Forum a couple times to watch those shows, and obviously we were there in Phoenix. So it was odd. Like just all of a sudden, I felt like um, starting to get integrated in his career a little bit on the tail end, and then boom, it ended quick. So yeah, pretty surreal.
Yeah, it would have been. I mean, the match itself was just, it was, I think the way that he would want to go out would just be as crazy as that match actually turned out to be. I mean, going through glass, Darby went through glass, his back was all cut open a bit. You guys got involved with it as well, obviously getting a bit of oomph after getting hit with by the Young Bucks. Did it feel, obviously you got to the ring, the crowd, I mean, it was 16,000 people there. Did you also feel that adrenaline when you were just, I know you were just standing on the stage waiting for him to come out, but was the adrenaline pumping for you at that point as well?
Oh yeah, and it's nothing can. There's no feeling quite like that. This is a little bit different because we were just there to kind of be a little side deal for my dad. And we weren't necessarily going, but I recall back to the football days. You're coming playing against LSU or Alabama or Georgia, whoever it is, and that stadium is so loud. Roar of the crowd is like one of the coolest things ever. So there was a little taste of that again. Um, and yeah, there was adrenaline for a couple different reasons, and one of them was just it's his last match, and I knew he was going to be doing some risky stuff, and I knew Darby was definitely going to be doing risky stuff. And so there were nerves around, geez, just let this thing go smooth, nobody get hurt, let him truly ride off into the sunset without a last minute, real turn for the worse. So yeah, I was glad everything worked out the way it did.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, obviously, it looked brutal, but luckily enough, that I think Darby needed 12 stitches, I think, and he's back afterwards. I think that's what come out anyway. I don't quite know if that's true, but that's around it. And now he's going off climbing Mount Everest, I believe. And whilst your dad rides into the sunset. Speaking of times when things didn't go well, we alluded to the time that he was in the WWE and he initially had to retire due to the buckle bomb from Seth. Obviously, looking back on it now, he didn't have to retire in the end. He come back for a few more matches, but it didn't really feel like it was his time at that point. I don't know what he was feeling, but I got the consensus was it wasn't right for him to have to retire then.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to go out. Injuries are never planned. And so I talked to him the next day after that happened, and hearing the way he described what it felt like, that physically the injury was pretty hairy. And yeah, I mean, it would have been a real shame to just go down like that. And
Mm.
I know for him, he's pretty critical over himself and critical over how he moves. And, he doesn't want to walk like an old guy. He doesn't want to run like an old guy. So the last thing he's going to want to do is kind of go down in that manner. So this last stretch with AEW I was glad that it worked out the way it did.
Yeah, more of a fitting way for him to finish up. I think, yeah, going away like that, it wasn't. It was a weird one. 'Cause you didn't. Because obviously watching it like we do, well, like I do, I didn't see anything wrong until it kind of finished. Sometimes you see a move and you go, yeah, something's not quite right. It felt like a normal move, but it's obviously the way it took it and the finish. But luckily, as you say, there was no massively damaging that he couldn't walk or couldn't get into another match like he done at AEW. So he got the send off the way it was, which is cool. But going back to you, you mentioned that you played college football. Now you're gonna have to forgive me over here, as you probably know. In the UK, we know soccer. This is
Yeah,
rugby or whatever. Talk to us about that. Because obviously you played tight end, right? Is that the right?
I did.
I'm a novice at this. What is tight end in terms of position?
Yeah, so it's a position that catches the ball, but
Mhm.
also does some blocking. So you need to be big enough to push some bodies around and hopefully fast enough to go, catch a pass and run with the ball. I should have specified when I said football earlier. I usually use the word American football when I'm talking to somebody, in Australia or UK. But yeah, that's broadly speaking what a tight end does.
When you was obviously getting into that, how much influence did your father give you about looking at that? Was there any talk, or did you ever say to him, "I fancy doing what you're doing"?
It's so since I was a kid, it was all about football. He told the story. He's probably told the story publicly, but his one of his favorite stories is when I think I was 7 or 8 years old. he's trying to move through the garage. He was really busy trying to get something done. And I kept on, jumping in front of him. I wouldn't let him walk past me. Dad, I want to play football. And he goes, do you know what you're talking about? Do you mean the ones where they wear flags? Because in America, we have flag football and then we have tackle football, which tackle football is the type that you guys would be at least somewhat familiar with in UK. And I said, yeah, I want to wear the ones where you have shoulder pads on and a helmet and you hit people. And he was really excited. And that led to, a 20-ish year stint, maybe 15-year stint of me playing American football. And I think I always thought, oh, I'm just going to go play in the NFL. And, that was my goal. And obviously I had a shot and tried out with a bunch of different teams and never actually landed on a roster. And so I never considered pro wrestling. It was just always something that was just my dad's thing. And, what I've said recently, have been asked a handful of times, is that, there's definitely an element of it that sounds, there sounds like there's some magic there a little bit. But some of that is probably just due to the fact that my dad has stepped away, and it feels weird to kind of let that piece go. And then there's some other maybe deeper elements to it that I'm still trying to sort through, but there's no direct plans to get into wrestling at this stage.
No, that's fine. And probably sometimes I always find it, and you see it loud, sort of second or third generation. It's always, and I don't mean it's horrible, it's always kind of living in their shadow, and it's trying to break out and carve your own. It's very difficult to do. And you see it even nowadays with the likes of like Cody Rhodes and everything, and it's still brought up who he actually is rather than he's Cody. It's the son of Dusty. In your case would be he's the son of Sting. So I always like him when they try and span out different careers for themselves, and that's probably testament to you for doing that. But also fitness is kind of your goal thing as well. You're really into your fitness. And again, was it any influences there from your dad, or did you even help your dad with some fitness as you've got older and he's obviously coming towards the end of his career?
I didn't. That would be something that I would have enjoyed doing, but we live in different states, and there's a few technical pieces there. But yeah, I think I've always had an interest in human performance. I think that probably started with me going, I want to be better at playing American football, and I'm in the field of sports science now in my career, and so I'm kind of surrounded in this ecosystem of what does it take to make an athlete better? And even though I don't have any, I'm not going to play in the NFL tomorrow or ever, there's no direct performance, things that I need to be prepared for. I just really enjoy trying to be as fast, as strong, as powerful, as, dangerous as I possibly can be. And so that's kind of my interest in training. It's a fun kind of path for me to be on.
Yeah, it certainly is. And again, it's a really good path to be on to look at fitness. And I obviously have to take a bit of the eating side of fitness into my regime now, not because of any reason, but health reasons. I have to do that. We're starting just going through some memories that I've had, and I don't know, maybe you can add to bits to this. I mean, obviously, when I first knew Sting, it was probably way before your time. He was the Surfer Sting that you can see behind me. But he did embroil in a sort of feud in wrestling that's kind of spanned even till the end, which was with Nature Boy Ric Flair, of course. What were your sort of, and again, when he was talking about it, if he did talk about it at home, what were those sort of bits of like with the feud of Rick over the years?
Man, this is probably going to be boring for you and your audience, but we just didn't talk a ton. Like he wasn't very interested in coming home and talking with us about his feud with Ric Flair or really with anybody else. I think that there's some where my kind of conversations with him have been more of the behind the scenes kind of stuff. What about his life and bits and pieces here and there. We didn't really talk storylines, and I don't think he ever once came home and said, "Yeah, I'm pissed we're going this direction," with Rick or whoever else. So it's probably a bit of a boring answer to that question, but yeah, they have a long history together, and obviously Rick was there at Revolution, and that was cool. Rick had a really strong positive reaction to the tribute video that they put together for my dad. I was in the room Charlie Ramone was getting my face paint on, and Rick came walking in and was just, you know, happy, sad all at once over the, the tribute video and all that. So yeah, they've got a long history together for sure.
Yeah, definitely haven't. My next question you kind of covered off there was how much did he coming back when he come back home? Did he talk wrestling? Which in this case was it kind of a strictly thing where he was more focused on the family side than being Sting, so to speak.
Yeah, and it wasn't that he was averse to it. It wasn't that if we asked him a question, and I think now that he's retired and in the last year of him kind of approaching retirement, I think Garrett and my sister Gracie and I all have started to go, you know what? I'm kind of curious to ask him about this. There's especially there's things that we all, because we were so removed when we were going into this, I had to start watching, YouTube channel. There's a couple of YouTube channels out there that do history. They recall different layers of, WCW history, and to kind of make sure that I was up to speed on all of his career. And there are certain things that after watching some of those videos, I go, I got to ask him about that. I remember hearing bits and pieces, but yeah.
How vaguely was it? Do you remember? And again, this is maybe you may have been too young, but when WCW got bought out by WWE, there was a time period because everyone Sting was always this kind of You would never have thought. Eventually, he did go to WWE, obviously, eventually, but you never thought it was ever going to happen. In that time, what do you recall from that time? Because he was kind of like he was probably sitting at home for a lot of it because he wanted, I suppose, sat the contract out or whatever the situation was. Did that feel weird having sort of him there quite a bit more than usual?
No, because from my perspective, he was home a lot regardless.
Okay.
The time when he was really on the road, I was really young. I mean, like young enough to not remember anything. Even Garrett was. So, by 2000, when all that happened, early 2000s, I think he was probably traveling what felt like once or twice a month at most. And then when he retired, I thought he would never wrestle again. That's kind of what we all thought. Um, and so it just kind of felt like a natural extension. Like, okay, he's home about as much as he was before.
Yeah, did it? There was obviously when he retired from WWE and got into AEW, that thing for us because obviously again you were thinking it was kind of happening. A lot of people were sort of retired and come out of retirement and managed to get cleared to wrestle again. Was that conversation had that I'm going to AEW kind of thing? I know he mentioned that Tony Khan made it feel comfortable and there was this, he wanted to do right by Sting and he's probably his last contract he was going to get in wrestling. But was there a conversation, I suppose, maybe not with you, but with family to sort of say, I'm going to go back. What's your thoughts?
Not necessarily. I'm sure we had talks here and there. But I knew that AEW was doing some good things, and the Khan family had invested quite a bit of money into launching that enterprise, and I think it was pretty clear all of us just wanted him to be able to go out the way he wanted to go out. And, you don't want to have a 30+ year career and then kind of go out on a misstep or an injury. And so, yeah, it was overall a really good thing.
Yeah, definitely. So there's one match though well, say never really happened, and you're probably going to know where I'm going with this. The one match that we thought it kind of got teased a little bit on WWE TV, and I think I even recorded an interview at the time where he was close to signing with them before he did. And it was a promo skit with The Undertaker that was airing, and there was these numbers, and I think it was 2/22/22, even said 22nd of February 2020, something like that. No, maybe, I don't know, 2/22/19 or something like that. And the twos, they were going to be scorpions. You could look at them, scorpions, and there was this house, and it was someone pacing through the house, and it looked very reminiscent of Sting in WCW. But it's that one match that I think everyone wanted to see that obviously we're never going to get now for two reasons. They're both retired. But in your, would that have been a match that you would have liked to have seen, not even now, but way back then?
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the one thing that I mentioned earlier, he never really talked about storylines that he wanted to go at home and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing we did talk about. I knew he wanted to do something with Taker. I think he just, in a lot of ways, he's a man of the people too. If he knows that it's something that people would eat up, he wants to see it happen. And so he was obviously very public about that. I've heard him talk about it a ton of times. He wanted to make it happen. I think it would have been really cool. and it probably, if done right, it could have gone down as, one of the top matches of all time. Maybe, in a different universe that's happening somewhere.
Well, it can probably happen on some computer games or something now, but it obviously won't be able to happen in real life anymore, which is a shame. I think that would have been such a great. I think the build to it as well, because you obviously get that build to a match, and you get all of that sort of stuff. Even that would have been just iconic.
Oh yeah.
And I think even if it was done in the WWE, even just the entrances would have been something for that. I mean, that's the one thing I will say to WWE, the entrances for their matches they get. It would have been a WrestleMania match for sure, and they would have been great entrances. And I think again that's one of the things I will say gutted that we didn't get, but it is what it is, and we have to get used to that fact that we're not going to see that match anymore, unfortunately. But finally, as we finish up, Stephen, what were your memories of your father's legacy now be in wrestling?
Man, it's the thing that hits me the most now is really this last 3-year stretch, probably more than anything else. And I think that's because I know the, injuries that he's dealt with, what his body probably must feel like at 65. And, just how hard he's willing to push to make sure that he still delivers and, isn't the old guy in the ring. And, watching his brain, navigate and try to think of, what can I do that would really kind of counter the narrative that I'm the old guy? What if I jump off this? What if I jump through glass? Whatever he has to do, that has just blown me away. And I think that's probably the coolest part of all of it to me. Obviously, you look back on the WCW days, the NWO era and all the repelling, those are, iconic. But I think what on a, personal level, what stands out and what means the most to me is these last few years.
Yeah, definitely so. He's had a storied career in wrestling, one that I'm personally thankful that I've got to see the majority of it, albeit over here. We didn't get WCW for a long time over here. So we got, I think, no, the first Nitro, I think, was one of the first ones we got. So we did get it, but he'd obviously been around. It was an established name by then, but we obviously got the privilege of watching it from the first Nitro right up until Revolution. And obviously I know everyone over here loves Sting, loves everything he does. And we obviously wish him the absolute best in his retirement. I'm sure he's gonna maybe have to, it may be a bit of a surreal time. I know he had the few years in WWE when he didn't work before making the jump to TNA from WCW, sorry. I'm sure it's going to be interesting, but he does have grandkids now as well that he can spend some time with when he wants, and he can kind of rest that body a bit more easier now. He doesn't have to jump through glass or anything, or he doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. He never did anyway, but I know he wanted to, as you said, he wanted to go out on top, which he did. But Stephen, thank you so much for taking your time just to come and reminisce a little bit about Sting's career, your father's career in wrestling. It means the world to us over here. And we wish you, your brother, your sister, and all your family all the success and happiness in the world. And we just want to, again, thank Sting for us, please.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was good chatting with you, and all the best to you as well.
Thank you very much, guys. He has been Steven Borden. I have been your host, Adam Cousins. This has been the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. And until next time, everybody, buckle down, stay safe. Goodbye.